In shadows cast by cruel despair, amidst the scars that none should bear, there lies a strength, a glimmering gleam. Within her heart, she dares to dream. She is born of grace, a soul refined. Through trials forged, her spirit's twined. Though battered, bruised, she will not concede. Her dream ablaze, she will find her freed. In darkest nights, when tears stream down, she faces demons with a frown. Through pain, she will rise like phoenix bright, defying darkness with her might. A victim once, yet now she is more a survivor. She will not ignore. Her worth defined by love, not hate. Her dreams, her wings, they elevate. She will paint the skies with colors bold, no longer caged, no longer controlled. With every step, her heart will soar beyond the reach of what was before. She dreams of peace where love abounds, where kindness heals all hurt that pounds. In unity, the world can mend, and scars of violence finally end. No more confined to shadows seen. Her dreams emerge like sunlit beam, to rise above and find her way. With courage strong, she will seize the day. So let us stand, embrace her fight. Together, strive for what is right. With hearts and hands, let's change the scheme and let all women dare to dream.
Hello and warm welcome to all of you. My name is Shabana Ansari and I'm the Legal Advocacy Coordinator and Immigration Representative at Maitri. Thank you all for joining us in observation of National Crime Victims' Rights Week. As a yearly tradition, US Department of Justice is observing National Crime Victims' Rights Week from April 21st to April 27, 2024. Maitri, for the third time in a row, is participating in this awareness building campaign, joining hands with organizations around the United States. As many of you are familiar, Maitri is celebrating 33 years of working with survivors of domestic violence in the South San Francisco Bay Area. Maitri provides holistic support through our culturally responsive, free and confidential life crisis line, legal services, immigration advocacy and representation, housing stabilization, economic empowerment, outreach, prevention, and advocacy services. Majority of our clients are first generation immigrant women from South Asian countries. Just last year, Maitri served 768 survivors with our crisis and support services. At Maitri's legal advocacy program, 293 clients were served with legal education, advocacy, awareness, along with immigration representation. Please do check out details of our services at our annual report published on Maitri's website. The 2024 theme asks all of us, friends, family members, neighbors, colleagues, community leaders, victim service providers, criminal justice practitioners, and health professionals, how we can help victims. Are we prepared if someone confides in us about a victimization? Is the organization victim centered and trauma informed? Are we familiar with the services available in our community? By doing so, we are able to offer support, options for life saving services, and most importantly, hope. To engage in this discussion, We are looking back today to the known victims of domestic violence homicides in the South Asian community in the past year and understands our responses and responsibilities going forward. Today, among us, we have esteemed organizational leaders in the gender based violence prevention movement. South Asian SOAR, the home for the national movement to end gender based violence in the South Asian community. Daya Houston, offering domestic violence services in Houston, Texas, and Texas Muslim Women's Foundation, providing culturally responsive services for Muslim women in Texas. Please note, this session is being recorded and streamed live on Facebook. Please mute yourself and write down questions in the chat once we open the Q&A segment. Now, I would like to invite Maitri's own Tejasvi Doda to take the conversation forward. She is part of Maitri since 2021 and is responsible for programming for Anjali Transitional Housing and Economic Empowerment Programs. Welcome, Tejasvi. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Shabana. Thank you for sharing the spirit of the National Crime Victims' Rights Week and highlighting the need for each of us as friends, family members, neighbors, colleagues, community leaders, and service providers to play our part in supporting victims of crime. According to research by Violence Policy Center, published by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 72% of all murder-suicides nationally involve an intimate partner. 94% of the victims of these murder-suicides are female. A murder-suicide is an act where an individual intentionally kills one or more people before or while killing themselves. Texas has seen 216 DV homicides last year alone. In California, the average we see is 124 women as victims for DV homicide. In April last year, a South Asian engineer with a PhD in industrial engineering lost her life to a gunshot wound inside her home in North Carolina. Her husband, who made the 911 call, was charged with first-degree murder. In February this year, many of us in the Bay Area woke up to the news of a South Asian family of 4 that included 4-year-old twins that were killed, and the killer being among the 4 deceased. Joining me to reflect on these lives lost and many other countless lives to domestic violence homicides is our panel today. Yasmin Ramachandra, Digital Organizing Fellow at South Asian SOAR. SOAR stands for Survivors, Organizations, and Allies Rising. Yasmin is an accomplished community organizer, coalition builder, and policy advocate. Thank you, Yasmin, for joining us. Mona Kafil, the Chief Executive Officer of the Texas Muslim Women's Foundation. Passionate about transforming the lives of women, Mona is a visionary leader in the nonprofit industry, known for her strategy and foresight. Thank you, Mona, for joining us. Dr. Nusrat Amin, currently Senior Director, Legal Services at Daya. She's the recipient of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence Lifetime Achievement Award in 2019, a lawyer and an academic working primarily in the area of gender rights and policy advocacy. Thank you, all 3 of you, for joining us today. I would like to start this conversation, Yasmin. Their Light Remains is a unique campaign that has pioneered documenting South Asian lives lost due to gender-based violence. How did SOAR come up with this annual remembrance series to honor South Asian lives lost? We would love to hear about your 2023 campaign and its findings, but please begin by sharing a little bit about SOAR for all our community members.
Will do, and I'm going to share my screen, so just give me one moment. Okay, can you all see the screen? Okay, thank you all. Hi, everyone, and thank you to the Maitri team for the very sweet introduction and for inviting me to speak today. My name is Yasmin. I use they, she pronouns, and I'm the organizing manager at South Asian SOAR. And we're a collective of survivors, organizations, and allies We were founded by community-based organizations, including the amazing ones on this call, so it's an honor to be here today. And across the nation, there are actually more than 40 organizations that work directly with South Asian survivors. And they've been around for over 4 decades, which is incredible to me. So something I do want to share with SOAR is that we have an approach based on what we learned from our community-based organizations, and it takes 3 different forms. The first of which is about capacity building. So we convene a membership of community-based organizations, and our goal is to support them and increase their capacity to engage in violence prevention work and to increase long-term support for survivors. The second strategy is to build survivor leadership. So through our storytelling work and our digital organizing membership, we explore alternative pathways to healing and accountability with and for survivors. And finally, we uplift our learnings from both of those spaces and respond to their needs by sharing stories, data, and community-based research to raise awareness and shift the national narrative, connecting our work to what's happening on the ground. So in the fall of 2022, when we noticed a really alarming increase in South Asian American power and gender-based violence fatalities, which I'll abbreviate as just GBV, we turned to our membership and brainstormed ways our community could respond on a national level. And that's how we created the Their Light Remains series, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. And this is where we honor the lives lost to GBV in our community every year. Right now, we're building our infrastructure for rapid response work, for research, and for advocacy, which includes the Remembrance series, also collecting data and raising public awareness. And I'll expand more on that later and how you all can get involved. So today I'm going to walk us through some of our findings from Their Light Remains 2023 series. At a high level, 2023 saw double the number of known lives lost compared to 2022. This itself was incredibly troubling for our community. And as we further examined each case and told their stories, more patterns began to emerge. So I'm going to share those key points from our analysis with you all, but as a quick content warning, these stats just carry so much weight, especially for survivors. So if at any point you need to step away or take a break, please do. You're always welcome to rejoin our space. So in the 2023 cases, 10 of the 11 homicides involved the death of an immigrant woman. This finding is likely not surprising to many of us in the room who are familiar with the high rates of violence immigrant women in our diaspora experience. One study that surveyed South Asian immigrants in the US found that 57% of female participants reported experiencing physical abuse, 42% reported experiencing economic abuse, and 29% reported experiencing immigration-related abuse. We do lack more disaggregated data that studies the violence immigrant women in our community face, which is why we closely collaborate with our community members to collect data and publish reports. And that's where these organizations in our membership have been instrumental. We hope to raise awareness of both the forms of harm that occur in our community and to also count the number of clients our organizations serve who are navigating systems as non-citizens, which looks very different compared to someone who does have citizenship. 6 of the 11 homicide cases involved gun violence. So national research shows that guns compound the likelihood of fatal violence, as we all know. And one publication actually found that cisgender male harm doers are 5 times more likely to kill their partner if they have access to a gun. And another publication found that nearly 2/3 of all intimate partner violence, or IPV homicides, involved gun violence. So the presence of a gun escalates these moments of crisis and has led to so many lives lost. But despite the vast amount of research and advocacy that our field has done, the issue of gun violence is on the Supreme Court's table right now, as they have to answer the question of whether or not people subject to protective orders should be allowed to possess a firearm. So the lower court actually ruled that restricting possession of a firearm violates the Second Amendment. So this one ruling struck down 3 decades of a federal ban and effectively lets people under protective orders pass background checks for guns. The case, U.S. and Rahimi, is still ongoing and has very real and measurable consequences that we may see as we continue to track fatalities in our community. But notably, about 60 domestic violence organizations across the country filed an amicus brief asking SCOTUS to reverse the lower court's decision. And we'll send links to everything that I mentioned in today's panel after. But I think what's the best part about this brief is really that it features stories of survivors. And I think that's different from a lot of the briefs that we see filed for cases like gun violence. I think it just underscores the importance of storytelling and bringing data to life. And that's something that we value in our Their Light Remains series as well. Similarly, 6 of the 11 cases were murder-suicides, claiming the lives of 17 people this year. All of the cases involved a male harm doer, and of those 11 men, 10 were South Asian and 10 were husbands or fathers of the people who lost their lives. I think these findings just stress the urgency for research and community interventions to support men and harm doers towards ending cycles of violence. And it also raises the question of how to address family violence as a distinct form of GBV. Along those same lines, 6 of the 11 cases involved a youth fatality. So of the 17 lives lost this year that we honored, 7 were children, 6 of whom were killed alongside their mother, sibling, or even their entire family. And I think we all know that the impact of IPV doesn't just stop at like one partner. One US-based study actually examined firearm homicides of children from 2003 to 2020, and it found that over half of IPV-related firearm homicides of children included the homicide of the adult intimate partner, of which 94% were the child's mother. And the same study found that the child firearm homicides had greater odds of involving IPV when co-occurring with the harm doer's suicide. And we see these findings from national research reflected in our smaller sample of South Asian American GBV cases from the past 2 years. But I think overall, just the heartbreaking loss of youth highlights the pervasiveness of IPV and family violence in our community. If you'd like to read the full analysis, you can find our letters to the community on our website for 2022 and 2023's Their Light Remains series. But I did want to give an update on what we're seeing this year. As Tejas has mentioned, there are more lives lost that we've noticed at the beginning of this year. We already know of 2 GBV cases that claimed the lives of 8 people, 5 of whom were children, and 1 of whom was a harm doer. And in both cases, the husband or father caused the harm by using a gun. The spike in violence at the end of 2023 and the beginning of this year motivated us to really rethink how we tell the stories and collect data on these cases in the most impactful way for our communities to raise awareness and to advocate for survivors. So one step we took was to create a GBV fatalities tracker, shown here in this little screenshot. In it, we're analyzing violence factors such as gun violence, the loss of immigrant women, and more, as I went through in today's presentation, to just track trends in the data. We're also categorizing all murder-suicides and youth fatalities as family violence to mark it as a distinct form of GBV. And the final part of our tracker will examine policies related to violence factors, such as legislation and court cases, to show the urgency of these issues and what actions we can take now to further survivor justice. In addition to the tracker, we're working with organizations and professionals in the field to build a rapid response toolkit. But externally, we'd love to invite you all and our community members to join us in 2 actions. So the first is we encourage anyone who is interested in publishing an op-ed or who has a platform to reach out to my colleague Amrita. I think it's a great opportunity to raise awareness in our local communities and nationally. And second, we're working with our community of organizers to prepare for our annual Digital Remembrance campaign at the end of the year. So if you're interested in creating the series, you can join our membership, but that's not the only way to get involved. This is a community initiative and a digital campaign. So we invite everyone to share and uplift the campaign, have conversations with your family about these losses, and just continue the conversation. So thank you all for listening. Please reach out to SOAR if you'd like to get involved. And with that, I'll pass it back to the Maitri team.
Thank you, Yasmin. I think you brought up a very pertinent gap that we have, that is to collect data, which is specific to the South Asian community. And I'm very thrilled in many ways that we have taken that first step, and it will only get better from here. Thank you for sharing the eye-opening report. Along with the intersections that you shared from the report, I think it is very common stereotype for the South Asian community as a model minority, where you're assuming that they're successful, they're hardworking, they're great at their job, and everything is at harmony at home. And so I think that is a stereotype which is a challenge for all of us, because that is the biggest barrier somebody experiencing abuse or violence is going to feel the pressure of in order to even confide or share what they're going through. And I think there's a lot of common myths surrounding domestic violence, like how a lot of community members might feel that a lack of education or financial status or specific religious affiliations or ethnic affiliations might make you more vulnerable. But many of us doing this work know that domestic violence happens irrespective of any of those characteristics. It is not limited to a set of characteristics, though. So thank you for all your work. And that brings me to a point where I would like to move to Mona. Mona, you've been there through the incidents that happened last year in terms of DV homicides in Texas. I'd like you to share about the Texas Muslim Women's Foundation's work, the responses of community members, court systems, and media.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to this platform and creating this space. Really appreciate it, Maitri and your team. And Yasmin, I cannot match your beautiful PowerPoint, so I'm just going to speak, but really good. So thank you for that. And Texas Muslim Women's Foundation has been established for past 19 years in Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. However, because of culturally specific work we do, there are a lot of clients that if they need shelter, and some of our services, they do travel from remote areas of US. So essentially, and I think that might be with all our agencies that are here. In terms of how we serve, what we do, we have intervention and then we have prevention. Intervention has shelter. We have 2 shelters. We have transitional housing apartment. We have, we recently started elderly abuse home, which we are seeing a rise in, and they have nowhere to go. We have case managers, social workers, we have counselors, we have attorneys. So essentially it's all wraparound services that a survivor would need. So there are many touch points. So that's all intervention. And I keep harping on the fact that we can continue to work on intervention, bigger shelters, bigger services, but where do we stop? When do we go upstream and stop that? And I think these conversations will lead us and will lead each one of you to think of prevention. So far, our prevention programs are few radio shows, few grassroots meetings, one-on-one, and educating people how to become an ally. Because the numbers that we know, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men. So when we talk about 1 in 4 women, how do we reach those women? So our outreach has to have that number that we have to reach 1 in 4 women to become an ally. So that's our prevention model. We've recently started some additional programs also, but having said that, I think within our staff, we understand that language access is a challenge, so our staff can speak more than 17 languages. And also understanding that even though the name is Texas Muslim Women's Foundation, that domestic violence does not see faith, it does not see culture, so we serve everyone and anyone. The name Muslim is because the founding members were proud. After 9/11, they said Muslim women also contribute to this society. And hence we want to have that Muslim name in this work. So that was the beauty of these founding members, and we honor that. But we support anyone, whoever comes through our door. We never ask about their faith or any alliance. So that's a brief introduction of Texas Muslim Women's Foundation. And I think during COVID, we've seen a sharp rise in South Asian homicides from Houston to Chicago to East Coast and West Coast. And to what we're all referring to today is death of Noreen Tooley in McKinney, Texas, which is our neighboring city. She was, when you look at a profile of a victim, we think they're not educated. We think they don't have resources. We think family is pushing it. However, when you read about Noreen, she defied everything. She was an independent woman. She was an influencer. She had moved from Bangladesh last year or a year ago to establish herself here. So she had all the signs of she should know better, right? How we easily tell people she should have known. Why didn't she leave? So yes, when she passed away, there was protective order. So there was a lot of times law enforcement was called at her home, at her residence, and finally there was a protective order. But she kept on telling her close family that I think once I have family, he'll get better. And she became pregnant. And even during that time, she defied protective order and she let him in. And what did he do? He strangled her. She thought having a baby would change the life. And that's one thread that we all know survivor keeps coming back. If this happened, he'll change. If that happened, he'll change. Women are nurturers. We nurture families, relationships, and this is exactly what happened. So he killed her and the unborn child. He right now is under capital murder charges. Why was it such a shock for our Dallas community? Because of how she was. She was in a place of telling people how to manage themselves. She was in a place of telling people how to get to resources. Even then, she did not. And that was a heartbreaking part for all of us, including agencies, her family, everyone. That's one part of it. The other part is there was no news. Nothing in Dallas Morning News, ethnic news, none at all. When reports started to come out, if you see the first news or the first comprehensive information that came out was January 8th. And even with that, it was limited. So when we step back and we talk about systemic change and systems, system was not with her. Yes, law enforcement got her protective order and everything, but system was not. The news did not even make. And people are going in every direction. What happened, how it happened. And then the stereotyping becomes the news. When the stereotyping becomes the news, there are 10 other women, 100 other women who are watching the news. They don't come out of that abusive situation. So it's a horrible cycle that we all see again and again. That was one. And then shortly, there was another incident, August 28th, I would say. Another family of 4 killed. This time it was gun, which was involved. And it's Sherwani family. And the husband was known to be ethical and very good man. They had an accident with their younger daughter who passed away by drowning. And I think after that, they weren't able to handle. And one day when Shirwani's mom, the grandmother, was out for a walk, and when she came in, a lot of, trying to get into the house, he had locked the door and he killed all 4, 2 kids and wife and himself. Gun was available to him. And again, the shocker was, first of all, he had gun. Second, he was the law enforcement and the counselors and child protective services. They all evaluated him and they cleared him. And I can tell you the reason why they cleared him, because he gave the right answers, because it was about his family. He needed to protect his family. And that's what we do. That's what survivors do. And how do we change the narrative first? And how do we make sure that these nuances are understood by law enforcement, CPS, all the system that we talk about? If they don't understand those nuances, our community will continue to suffer. And I think as all the agencies that are present here, part of our work should be how do we educate the system to support these victims. I can go on about cases after cases, but that's the state Texas is living in. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you for sharing the chilling details of the DV homicides in Texas last year. I think it's deeply painful for all of us to understand that it could have been any of us in these situations, and for us as a community to think about our next steps in terms of challenges on what we can do. Dr. Nusrat Amin, you're in Texas too. What the larger issue of domestic violence in our communities, what can community members and advocates do to support? Can you please share a little bit about Daya before you begin?
Thank you, Tejasvi, and thank you, Maitri, and especially Zakia and all, the whole team. to have this timely conversation today. I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation. DIA formed actually after a tragic murder suicide incident in 1995. To prevent such incidents, DIA started its journey in 1996. Unfortunately, we are still seeing that. And in Bogota, it really makes me think with you all, what can we do differently? How can we prevent such incidents? And so here is where the statistics are so important to let the people know that it is happening in our background. So what DIA does is our approach is twofold, the direct and the preventive, starting at the crisis intervention and safety planning at the very first call at the helpline. This call is very, very important for us for this to take, because for the survivor, it can be one and the only call that she's making or he's making. So we take it very seriously. So irrespective of the fact that we say that we are a South Asian culture-specific services, as Mona said, our doors are always open to everyone who makes that call, because we want to make that call very educative and to do the crisis intervention, safety planning, so that even if that survivor cannot call again, the survivor knows the rights. So we take it very, very seriously. So from there to counseling by licensed counselors, and we provide holistic services as well, case management, economic empowerment, housing, and legal advocacy. And through our prevention program, we offer trainings and participate in the community events to build awareness and to end the stigmas that exist on the cycle, and educate on the cycle of abuse, and advocate for the policies to create a systemic change. As Mona and Yasmin, from your conversation, it is so evident that all of our organizations who are dealing with survivors, it is imperative that we take those issues, we take the gaps in the systems we see when an incident happens, and take it to the policy to see whether we can make a change. DIA is a part of that. Many organizations are a part of that. And I encourage everyone to be a part of that change and have the policy component in our services so that we achieve that. And this year, DIA is putting extra effort to see that we honor the lives and they're avoided. These incidents are avoided. Today, we are coming together to honor the ones who lost their lives so soon and address the untimely loss and help the community to process in the healing, and at the same time, how to go forward. And we have heard from partners like SOAR and Mona at ATMWF that how vital this is as a community to address. We come from a culture of collectivism. We think of our family first rather than us. We think about our culture, the society, the stigma, what people will say if I leave or file divorce. I am a survivor, and I would say instead, let's say that my life is worth living. So is yours. What I like to focus now is how, as a South Asian community, we are thinking and looking at these incidents, what we are learning, how we are engaging in these conversations, how we are equipping ourselves in the prevention. Secondly, what is our expression within our agency with the survivors who are at risk, and what we see, how they are dealing with this. let me tell you one thing. My experience sometimes is very frustrating. But hold on, we need to go on, keep educating ourselves and others on this issue. Most of us, we think that it is not our problem. It doesn't happen in our community. And it is, something alien. It is their problem, not ours. People don't realize that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men are victims of abuse, as Mona just stated. So you will come across someone in your circle by statistics who is going through abuse. So therefore, it is imperative that you know about this. About this, the 3 R's that I keep on telling everyone, that, the recognize, respond and refer. We have trainings around this. So if you're talking to one of your friends or family who may be in that statistics, and maybe who are going through it and they're silent survivors, try to recognize the red flags that the person who may be going through. Respond without being judgmental and validate the abuse. But do not get involved in mediation, because in DV cases, mediation is not the solution. So what do? The 3rd R, refer to a professional agency. Here we are 4 agencies here. There are 40 plus agencies, as Yasmin just said. Go and look into the website. Whichever state you are in, there will be some agency who is culturally competent, who's going to help us. Reach out to us. We will connect you to a specific agency if we are not in that state where you're calling from. This is how the community should be thinking about. Please attend our trainings. We offer trainings. And Yasmin showed the statistics and how important it is for the community to recognize the issue, right? It is happening in our background. So as we offer trainings to the law enforcement, to the medical community, to the judges, to the attorneys, to the members of the community, we try to make them understand the issue. So let's do it together. Let's just, offer these trainings, keep on offering these trainings. Secondly, as far as survivors are concerned, we often see that they are minimizing the abuse and the danger of the lethality, even when the abusers own guns and weapons. Why is this? There are numerous reasons for this why, right? One of the reasons is the ignorance of the law and the legal system in the USA when a survivor comes as an immigrant and becomes a victim of domestic violence. The barriers, the various barriers that they face, from language to immigration. In spite of all the barriers, if they receive a protective order, they need to understand that it is very important to keep it and not try to non-suit it. We see a lot of our clients come and say, oh, I need to non-suit this order because I'm getting all these calls from the family in the home country and the family here and the friends here that I shouldn't be doing this. It is, even if you do apply for non-suiting, it is most probably will not be granted by the judge, because in our experience, we see only in the extreme cases you get a protective order. Noreen Duli also got that protective order, but she was thinking beyond. She was thinking She was thinking of the stigma. She was thinking of the family. She was thinking of maybe something's going to change. So we are constantly educating and managing the expectation of our clients who come and the importance of the protective order. The other reason may be the fear of leaving. And we all know statistically that there is 70% chance of homicide at the time of leaving, and the unknown future. That is keeping the survivors even in that situation where there is a lot of risk. Finances. Research says 99% of the cases of domestic violence, there is finances. Financial control is number one tool that the abusers use to keep the survivors in the relationship. That is why we see, even in the most dangerous situation, the survivors are thinking about how they're going to manage if they leave, especially if they have children in the equation.
Nusrat, I'd like to hold your thought here, because we do have some issues that are corresponding to what you just spoke about. So I'd like to open it up for the panel to add their thoughts.
Yes.
So I think some of the things that all three of you have pointed out, right? One of it is limiting our minds of domestic violence happening to X, Y, or Z because of a set of characteristics. Many incidents around the country in the South Asian community have reminded us that there is no perfect victim, right? So, like, for example, you were asking by the way you dressed, or you should have known better, or you should have fought harder, you provoked him. How can we as a community reduce, eliminate victim blaming? Mona?
I think one of the bigger group that we have to address as a DV agencies, all of us, is re-educate the faith leaders, not on the faith, but how not to promote that. Because many women do go to faith leaders as first point of contact. And when the faith leader is not ready, or he or she is in denial of, no, there's no such thing as domestic violence in our community. This is all in women's head. You're breaking a family. So one thing is, how do we make sure that faith leaders understand and we work with them? So I think that would be one that I feel is a major one for us, and we work on it. And Yasmin and Nusrat, please jump in.
So, yes, Mona, that is so very important. So we do work with the faith leaders. Sometimes we have all these hurdles going to few of them, but we keep on doing it. We have a specific event that we hold each year in October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we get all the faith leaders from all the community come together on one platform and speak about domestic violence. And we are trying to create a uniform message for the faith leaders so that everyone says the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nusrat and Mona. But I was talking about how do we minimize victim blaming. So besides bringing in faith leaders into the conversation, what can we as community do as independent individual neighbors and community members? How does our mindset need to be geared towards?
Yasmin, would you like to?
Sure. And I appreciate everything you all said, because I think, yeah, faith leaders do play an important role. And not just like broadly, I think anyone who holds power in the community and whoever people look to is a good person to try to change the narrative for. But like way zooming out, I think people, when they hear about instances of domestic violence or just how harm is being caused in the community, they almost micro focus in on like, oh, this is one instance, this is a one-off. It's just that family that's dealing with it. Like what said in the panel, it's not my problem. I think the more we have conversations about how prevalent it is and more data that we share, more campaigns that we share for public awareness, it becomes hard to just say like, it's just an individual's problem. It's just that one person who like did the wrong thing and that's their fault. You have to like zoom out and understand it's a systemic issue. but it takes a lot of knowledge and understanding to understand like the root causes of that. I think if you can't identify the root causes of that violence, then you get flustered and want to point your blame to someone, and the easiest person to blame becomes the person who experienced the harm versus the actual like systems at play, the cultures at play that we need to shift. So I think just like storytelling is a big part of that, which is why we're working on a storytelling anthology right now at SOAR. But on top of that, like the Their Light Remains series was created for that reason too. I had a conversation like with my grandparents about the Their Light Remains series and told them about the fatalities we were tracking, and they were shocked. And I think that they've seen violence in our family. Our family is definitely not a family that hasn't had harm occur in it. We've had suicides, murder-suicides in our family, in our extended family, and still they were shocked. I think they just always focus in on like what's happening insularly and not focusing on like societal level change, societal level harm. So I think that's something to keep in mind.
Thank
And I
you.
would add one more thing. When we talk about victim blaming, I think we all as advocate and as women have to look inwardly. Do we directly or indirectly promote that?
Mhm.
We see lots of WhatsApp jokes these days based on women. We will always have a laugh at them. Why? When there is a joke about husband and wife being whatever, minimized, we say it's okay and we forward it. These are such micro items that we don't even think. When we look at a joke or even TV, our programs are full of it, full of it.
Our social media.
Yes, we don't stand up to that. All South Asian dramas, all South Asian, making fun of women. Why don't we stand up to that? So we have to look inwards and see how do we change those small and make small steps. So yeah.
We've also observed that the overwhelming majority of victims in these DV homicides are female. And that brings us to a question: what is the role of men, and how do we model healthy masculinity instead of stereotype behaviors? Like, for example, behaviors where culturally you're conditioning someone to say, yeah, men don't really seek help, which includes both medical attention and emotional support, or you're saying, oh, you're not supposed to show weakness, men and boys have to be tough, or restricting emotions to acceptable ones. Like, Mona, you brought in a point where you said we consume a lot of media content, personal or entertainment, which involves a lot of these. And also you see that there's certain behaviors that are acceptable for men to express, like anger, jealousy, or lust. And there are things that are perhaps I've not seen, or very little of compassion or kindness or understanding. So how can we do this? How can we as a community support each other to build healthy masculinity and bring in men into the campaigns?
I always say we have the power. We are mothers. We are daughters, sisters. We can change men. We have to make sure how they're raised. It's easy to point fingers at men are like that. Well, there was a mother who raised him. There was someone who raised him. So we don't give ourselves that credit. We are so powerful. We give birth to men. We can't raise them well. Of course we can. So that's where the baseline starts. I say women have to change. Mother-in-laws have to change.
I also feel it's just a mindset. We always think that, men has power, women that, of course, Mona has power. I have power. I have two boys. I'm trying to raise them. And sometimes, my elder son is married, and sometimes my daughter-in-law say, is very close to me, and my son says, whose mother are you? Are you her mother or my mother? And says, whoever is the wrongdoer, I'm not that mother. So it is absolutely what you teach at home. That's the main thing. Professionally, what we need to do, and we are doing, I'm sure all of our organizations are doing, is involving youth. So we are going to college campuses and we are trying to engage men, students, in our mission, in our movement to end domestic violence. So teach them, have your allies, my husband is always encouraging me to do domestic violence, work. He's the one who encouraged me after, just a year of our marriage to go to England to do PhD on domestic violence and law. So he sacrificed, actually. I also sacrifice. And if he sacrifices, I don't say that he only sacrificed. I also sacrifice, right? So let's take ourselves into equation and just not make one gender superior than the other. We all can work together to address this.
Thank you. Yasmin, any thoughts you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think in terms of the prevention level, I completely agree. And I think sometimes when men do cause harm, it's either like a binary of what happens, right? Either nothing happens to them, so then they continue to act with impunity, or something does happen to them, so they're thrown into the criminal justice system. And that's like jail time in prison. I don't think either of those options actually educate the person who caused harm on what happened, like why they caused that harm, making them like unlearn whatever exploitation they were trying to reinforce with whoever they harmed. If we had more community interventions and things like transformative justice or restorative justice circles, conversations, and they actually engaging people who cause harm, we would have a much more just society. We wouldn't have to lean on the carceral system. And we also wouldn't have to feel that like, if I do nothing, then that person also gets away with it scotch-free. So my only option is to talk to the police. So I think the other thing is giving survivors more options, and that by extension also gives harm doers more options to be in conversation with one another and to be in conversation with educators like us and prevention workers.
I think both the issues that we spoke about, victim blaming, healthy masculinity, they all lead me to this question on mental health. We don't seem to value accessing mental health services, or there is some cultural conditioning and barriers we as a community have that prevent us from, say, speaking to a counselor or speaking to a therapist. Even as agencies that is doing this work, we all know how hard it is to get someone to access those services. So how do you think we can change the narrative in terms of mental health? What is the help we need from community members who are joining us, who are interested, who want to do this, who see what's happening?
So, so what we have seen the change in our own agency is that although we have like always had licensed counselors, we were not seeing so many of our survivors actually seek that service. They would come for, rental assistance, legal, the immediate need. But to process their thought in that crisis, counseling is so important, right? So we intentionally made it very, very accessible to the clients, saying that we have this counseling, which maybe we were not talking about before. Maybe we were not talking about specific services. So now we are doing it, and we are seeing an increase in our, survivors who are actually seeking for mental health counseling. And last year, with the 619 clients that we served, 428 counseling sessions were done. And that shows that how we are actually, this in mental health is, clients are coming forward. But when you're talking about community, the community actually needs to know the importance of mental health as well, right? So with all this education, all this, that we are doing with the community, this is one thing that we always talk about the importance of mental health, and how, if we lose a young person. Recently my son lost his friend, and we spoke about this importance of the mental health, where it is, may have prevented that incident, right? So again, going back to Yasmin, where model minority myth, we don't understand. We are not putting ourselves in the youth's shoes and seeing what challenges that they are facing. We are only asking them, what is your grade? are you going to be the doctor, engineer, or lawyer? We are not trying to understand, and there's this generational gap that needs to be understood. So these conversations are always vital to focus on mental health.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nusrat. Mona and Yasmin, would you like to add?
I think Nusrat responded it comprehensively. We have several programs, and I feel each time when we, specifically for youth, each time we develop a mental health for youth, the youth are not on the table. We are not listening enough. I am a mother of 27 and 21, and even they are constantly course correcting me how bad I am. And that gives me a bit of shaking in my parenting, but we have to listen to them with a much better, with patience, I guess. We have to listen. And to Nusrat's example, how she's speaking to her son and how she's raising them, and each one of us, whoever has children, how we raise them. Parenting is hard, and it begins at home. It truly begins at home.
Yasmin, acknowledging that you might have a different perspective, both in terms of the generation and as someone who is interacting a lot with young people, please share what you think.
Yeah, I have children, but I have 2 chihuahuas. I am a child of someone, so I can speak to that. I actually am on like anti-anxiety medications, antidepressant medications, but I only got on them after begging like my mom to put me in therapy. It took me 2 years in high school to beg her. I was finally in therapy my senior year. I've been treated since then by psychiatrists and psychologists, and that's helped me tremendously. Like, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't think I'd be working in this space, but I do want to say, I think the bigger issue is that when we talk about violence, I think people are hesitant to talk about mental health, almost because there's this worry that, oh, we're making an excuse for the person who caused harm. We're making an excuse for just saying that they're mentally ill. And I think we see that play out in court. Like, we see that defense being used. But if you don't think about mental health as a defense, like, think about it outside of the court system, just on a community level, interpersonal level. Someone is needing help, they just don't know how to seek help. So what are the barriers to seeking help? I think Mona and Dr. Nusrat named a ton of them. Other ones that I might name are just access to healthcare. If you are an immigrant in this country, there's a 5-year ban on accessing Medicare and Medicaid. And no matter what your status is, even if you have a green card, if you're not. So there's other like systemic barriers that are codified in law that make it hard to access that care, even if you wanted it. So yes, there has to be a desire to access the care, but there also needs to be pathways to get that care.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you for adding that. Dr. Nusrat, I had a question about immigration being used as a tool of abuse. And we've seen that in many of the stories that we discussed today, that the characteristic of being an immigrant. Can you share with us how, as a community, we can probably take some steps to mitigate vulnerability for immigrant?
So again, it comes to statistics, right? We need to understand that, 6 in 10 Asian American are immigrants, right? 16% of them are undocumented. There are studies which shows that, their immigrant survivors suffer 3 times more abuse and often than the general population. 70% of those, studied, the abusers never even applied for immigration. Even if they applied 4 years after. So there are so many statistics out there that the community needs to understand that this is an issue. Not only the community, the stakeholders. Mona and us, we are always going to the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? And some of them are our grantors, right? We meet the federal grantors, we meet the state grantors. We have to let them know that immigration is a huge issue, and and the survivors suffer the control because the abusers know that this is the power that I can hold over the my spouse, whoever it is, he or her. So this is very important, and we need to have dialogues like that. We need to have conversation. We need to do storytelling. Yasmin says storytelling is so important. I am actually taking one of our survivors to the Department of Labor to share her story, how important it is when she had the immigration tied to the abuser, how it was difficult for her to break the cycle, right? So storytelling is very important. The state, the federal people who are making these policies, they need to know the stories, and with statistics, right, all the time, it will make a change. Policy does not happen overnight. It makes a change. Change happens in time, in due course, but we just have to keep on talking about these issues and immigration, the importance of immigration being a tool for the abusers to control.
Thank you, Dr. Nusrat. Yasmin, during your presentation and while we were discussing DV homicides, I think one term that came up a lot is guns. And as a model minority, we don't prescribe or we don't accept the fact that there are guns in our community and that it could be used as a deadly weapon towards abuse. Can you talk a little bit about the intersection of these homicides and gun violence?
Yeah, I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. The guns undoubtedly escalate every situation that you're in, regardless of like what kind of harm is being caused, whether it's interpersonal violence or harm between like a stranger and someone else, or a mass shooting or militarism. Guns play a role in all of those forms of harm and violence. And I mean, if it were my choice, there would be no guns in this country. But unfortunately, I'm not in the power to do that. But I think that means that we need to think a lot about gun control and gun education, and also just research on gun violence. I couldn't find honestly any research looking into recent numbers about how many South Asians own guns. I truly don't know. And I think I was under the impression that like barely any of us did, because I think I also had the same kind of myth in my head that no, why would we own guns? Like we're not those kind of people. But anyone could be that kind of person. I actually found out that one of my masas does have a gun, and he had pulled out on his family, and he is bipolar disorder. I just found this out in like one burst of talking to my cousin. I was like, isn't that wild that gun violence is in our community? And she was like, oh my God, my dad actually had a gun. He showed this to us as a youth. And I was a kid knowing him. I didn't see him in that light. I didn't see him in that perspective. So I think even just talking about it in your family, you might find out more. But on a national level, we do need to invest in more research about gun education and prevention and ownership within the South Asian community, and how are they even obtaining these guns? What licenses do they have? And then education part, I think if you can think of the motivation of why a parent might not want to have a gun, if you educate them on having a gun in the house, it increases the chance of a youth fatality. Like youth are very likely to hurt themselves when there's a gun in the house. Just something that would make them have stake in the conversation of like why gun control is important, I think is the biggest thing to discuss in our diaspora.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you for highlighting that. I would like to open our audience questions, the panel. So I see a question. I think, Mona, this is referring to our conversation where a mother gives birth to her children and has the power to raise them, true. But will a woman who is rendered powerless due to abuse have that power to raise a capable and resilient child or children? Or will they fall through the cracks because of her?
I think it has many layers in one small question, right? I think women who are abused have their mind scientifically, as they say, that there is a rewiring of mind, right? If she is aware that she's being abused, she must have support system, and we have to be that ally. And I think part of that can be our old system that a child is also raised by a village of people, not just one. This isolation in the global north is killing our culture, where, if I'm unable to raise my child, I have my sister, I have my aunt who's there to help. And same thing with boys. uncles and cousins, older cousins, mentors. How do we build that village if somebody is aware that they are being abused? But if somebody's not even aware, then that's a total different conversation. Mother needs her own mask first before we even talk about children and raising them. So she doesn't even have her own oxygen mask. So very multi-layer question that you have, but thank you for that.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you for answering. So we have another question. It says, thank you so much for this panel discussion. I'm a licensed psychologist and my concern is around mandated reporting. And how can we as co-conspirators change the law around who's a mandated reporter? Can we put more on the line to support survivors of domestic violence? Anyone on the panel want to take that?
I think it's a great question. We always have this discussion all the time, whether we need to report to the CPS because we are mandated reporters, right? Whether we need to report to the law enforcement, something is happening. So we have this conversation all the time, but there are also laws. Like in Texas, there's a privilege law that covers us from reporting and from being subpoenaed or being in the court. I was just talking to Harima Mela, who's in the audience today, who's the licensed counselor and one of our advocates, who's helping a client, whether we need to go to the court, the attorney saying whether we need to go to the court to say what we are doing with the service that we are providing. And we said, no, we don't want to, because we are covered by the privilege law. And we see that if we go and speak, the counter questions can put the survivors in a bad spot, and that happens. So yes, there are protective laws also that help us not to speak, not to if we are subpoenaed, then we can say no and we can quash that in the court. So, and I really value this question because this is something that we have conversations all the time within our organization, within all the leaders, how we can how we can address this. Mona, please add what.
Mona and Yasmin, any of you want to add anything? Please go ahead.
Well, I think when we are talking about direct services like each one of us, part of our, let's say 10% of our work has to go into advocacy building. Mm-hmm. We have to work on those policies. We right now are still very, very much fragmented. And what happens is that when there is an election cycle, from city council member to state reps, they all start looking at us. Oh, we are here to help you. We are here to help you. But for us, it's a reaction exactly to what we are saying. As a huge all over US agencies, what should be our priority and who should we target? As state rep, as senators, we have to build that coalition and be very solid on how we want to look at systemic change. I think that's something we need to look and work towards.
Thank you. Yasmin?
Yeah, I don't have the solution, but I agree with everything that Dr. Yusuf and Mona said. I think that's absolutely right on the systemic level. I think on a community level, when I think of co-conspiratorship, I think a lot about relationship building, and I also think about youth. I think almost every touch point that a young person has with a mentor in their lives or someone who is teaching them their lives, that person is most likely a mandated reporter unless it's a family member or someone in their community. So who is the person that they can turn to when they are experiencing violence at home? So that's just something to think about. How can we build those relationships and actually reach youth if it's not going to be through mandated reporters?
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone in this room today that we will have an evaluation survey in the chat. I want all of you to have a look at it and complete it, because this really helps us designing our community involvement and organizational priorities. It's very valuable for us. So please don't forget to do that before you leave. I want to come to the panel with one last question for all of you. If there was one thing that you'd like to call for action today from community that is here, what would it be? You'd like to share one thing about what you want to share to the community, or one call for action that you'd like to give to the community today?
You're tying our hands, you know that. We all have a list.
I know. That's why I said one thing, because we can go on.
All right. I'm going to volunteer Yasmin and Nusrat to go first.
That is hard, one thing. Then I think I'll lean back on our series that we're doing, Their Light Remains, the whole point of it, just having community conversations. I think anything that you can do to bring awareness to this. I know it's like tough to have these conversations. It is not easy to bring up these topics at home, especially if they're never discussed. So if you need a step before having that conversation, find a community of support. SOAR is definitely, I think, a place for that. We would love to have more members just to give each other support and being that disruptor in their family, because we tend to be like the group of misfits that has the conversation at the Thanksgiving dinner table that no one wants to have, and no one wants to invite us to their dinners. So you can find us in that little group there, but then making sure that you have the data, the resources, making sure you're doing your own research so that you can back up those conversations, not just with the stories, but also the numbers to show that it's a systemic issue, I think will be our call to action.
Okay. Thank you, Yasmin. I think, as you said, somebody said, how do you recommend these conversations, right? You already addressed being the disruptor in the family, so by asking the questions.
I'll go with Yasmin's words. I was always a disruptor, so in the family. And when I became a survivor, I really had to be the disrupt, that one person who, was against the wave. As Mona said, we have a long laundry list. I would just say one for today's conversation's sake is, having conversations like this, prevention, and having us to be in the policy tables. Let's just be on all and any policy table that we can be to voice the South Asian culture, the needs, because they may be different. So I am trying to be, in the policy tables, and I've seen the difference. It's 17 years in federal, law, in state law, in local, from language accessibility to, immigration. So, so let's all just focus, because as Mona said, intervention we are doing every day, but we are seeing all the gaps. We are seeing all the systems gaps and the needs that needs to be addressed and go for the change. So we need to be on all those tables. And my one and only thing is, we must be the change we wish to see in the world. That's Gandhi's word. I always believe it's in my email. And I feel that we have to be the change.
Thank you, Dr. Nusrat. Mona.
That's why I said, let these ladies go first, because they're covering part of my list.
It sounds good.
But if I have one call to action, it would be, if you are affiliated with any organization, think about policy work. That's one. And also, just not think about intervention, think about education. Part of our work is educating women. Part of our work is creating male allies. Part of our work is to define what violence is, what mental health is. So when you have 100% of social service organization, how do we bring in 10% of policy? How do we bring in 40% of education? Think about that.
Thank you, Mona, Yasmin, Dr. Nusrat, for this insightful conversation today. I think all of us who are part of this conversation today are very grateful to have had this time with you. Maitri is grateful to have created this space and have the dialogue and discussion on this very pertinent issue in the community. For those of you who still have unanswered questions and comments, please be sure that we are reading it, we are taking note of it, and we will be sending you a follow-up email along with the recording of this conversation and answers to your questions from the panelists. So thank you for your patience. And I think for me, if I want to put our discussion in perspective, there are three things that stand out for me today in all the things that we spoke about. One is the need for data that we don't have any of, and we are just beginning to do it in our all small little way. But the need for more data, for more research, for more advocacy in terms of policy work. The second is on a day-to-day basis, we are all as agencies dealing with crisis. And sometimes it's hard to look at the big picture when you're only looking at it as one incident or one day. And I think that's something we need to do in terms of emphasizing our ability to contribute to prevention in the community, which includes mobilizing for budget and budget cuts that are coming in the prevention space, which is important. And I think, lastly, I think the unresolved trauma that we all hold as a community, which might be because of different factors in each circumstances, but that's all leading to mental health crisis, which also we know is correlated with domestic violence, homicides. So I think these are three things that stand out from today's discussion. I'd like to thank every one of you who's here today, decided to spend the middle of the day with us to have this conversation. We will definitely get back to you. Please visit Maitri's website and our social media handles, Maitri Bay Area, to stay tuned about future discussions and all the work that we're doing on the ground. We definitely love your comments. Please send us your comments and questions to maitri@maitri.org. Thank you.